Imagine a plague that infected millions in just a year, killing as many as 5,000 people per day. For the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire, this nightmare was a reality. Beginning in about 541 CE, the Plague of Justinian swept through Europe, killing up to a quarter of the Eastern Mediterranean population and possibly as much as 10% of the world's population. Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today we're diving deep into a historical nightmare, the Plague of Justinian. Buckle up, because this wasn't your average bout of the flu. We're talking about a devastating pandemic that reshaped the world. Was the Plague of Justinian. Despite the catchy name, the Plague of Justinian was identified as the bubonic plague, otherwise known for its 14th century cousin, the Black Death. The disease earned its name from Justinian, the ruler of the Byzantine Empire at the time. It also has a double meaning, as Justinian's handling of the crisis was almost its own form of infection. As farmers and other workers were dying by the thousands, Justinian was unable to complete many of the projects he had started and began to raise taxes and change the tax code. How and where did the plague spread? Like the modern bubonic plague, scientists believe the Plague of Justinian spread through fleas. Studies indicate the plague may have originated in China or India and was then transported to the fertile valleys of Egypt through trade routes. In 541, the Egyptian port of Pelusium was the first city to document cases, and by 542, cases were seen as far north as England. Due to the nature of ancient records, we don't know the full extent of the disease's spread. We know the Mediterranean region was the hardest hit, but anecdotal evidence indicates some cases occurred in England, Germany, and other northern regions. What effects did the plague have? Justinian wasn't just a leader, he was also a conqueror. By 542, he had reconquered most of the Roman Empire's previous domain and was hoping to solidify his rule. The plague made this all but impossible, as farmers, soldiers, and other key members of society fell ill and died from the disease. By 568, Justinian's empire began to crumble as the Lombards invaded northern Italy, and within a few generations, enemies were at the gates. Byzantium remained a power through 1453, but it would never be as large as it had been before the plague. The arrival of a killer. The year is 541 AD. The Byzantine Empire, under the rule of Emperor Justinian I, is at its peak, but a dark cloud is looming. Whispers travel along trade routes of a mysterious illness spreading like wildfire in the east. It arrives in Constantinople, the bustling heart of the empire, with a vengeance. The symptoms are horrifying: fever, chills, buboes, swollen lymph nodes, and a gruesome blackening of the skin. People die within days. The disease is highly contagious, and fear grips the city. Hospitals overflow, and the dead pile up faster than they can be buried. A devastating impact. The plague doesn't discriminate. It rips through the rich and poor alike. Trade grinds to a halt as travel becomes too risky. Food shortages erupt as agricultural production plummets. Social order crumbles as people become desperate to survive. Historians estimate the plague wiped out a staggering 25 to 50 million people, nearly half the world's population at the time. It left a profound impact on the Byzantine Empire, weakening its military and crippling its economy. The search for answers. With no understanding of germ theory, people were at a loss. Blame fell on everything from divine punishment to comets. Treatments were primitive and largely ineffective. Some believed burning incense or fleeing the city could ward off the illness. Even Emperor Justinian himself contracted the plague, but miraculously survived. This event, however, did not mark the end of the outbreak. The plague would erupt in waves for centuries to come. How did the Plague of Justinian end? The plague decimated Constantinople and spread like wildfire across Europe, Asia, North Africa, and Arabia, killing an estimated 30 to 50 million people, perhaps half of the world's population. People had no real understanding of how to fight it other than trying to avoid sick people, says Thomas Makaitis, a history professor at DePaul University. As to how the plague ended, the best guess is that the majority of people in a pandemic somehow survive, and those who survive have immunity. How many died in the Justinian plague? The exact number of people who died in the Justinian plague is unknown, and estimates vary widely. Some historians believe it was one of the deadliest pandemics in history, resulting in the deaths of an estimated 15 to 100 million people during 2 centuries of recurrence, a death toll equivalent to 25 to 60% of Europe's population at the time of the first outbreak. However, other scholars believe these figures are exaggerated. They point out that there is a lack of reliable data from the time period and that the estimates may be based on comparisons with later plagues, such as the Black Death. Plague treatment. Once affected, people had 2 courses of action: treatment by medical personnel or home remedies. William Rosen identifies the medical personnel as primarily trained physicians. Many of the physicians engaged in a 4-year course of study taught by trained practitioners iastrophists at Alexandria, then the premier center for medical training. The education received by the students primarily centered on the teachings of the Greek physician Galen, 129 to 217 CE, who was influenced in his understanding of disease by the concept of humorism, a medical system which relied on the treatment of disease based upon bodily fluids known as humors. Lacking access to one of the types of physicians, court, public, private, people often turn to home remedies. Rosen identifies various approaches people took towards treating the plague, including cold water baths, powders blessed by saints, magic amulets and rings, and various drugs, especially alkaloids. Failing all the previous approaches to treatment, people turned to hospitals or found themselves subject to quarantining. Those who did survive were credited, according to Rosen, with good fortune, strong underlying health, and an uncompromised immune system. The Plague of Justinian was a turning point in history. It devastated the Byzantine Empire and ushered in a period of decline. Yet, humanity persevered. The empire slowly rebuilt and medical practices gradually evolved. The plague serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of human societies to pandemics. It highlights the importance of public health measures and international cooperation in the face of such threats. Thanks for joining me on this journey through this dark chapter in history. What other historical events would you like to see explored? Leave your suggestions in the comments below.